A weathered limestone monument sits on the edge of the Giza Plateau, baking in the same desert sun it has faced for thousands of years. Millions of tourists have photographed it. Most of them never look down. They never ask what is beneath the paws of the Great Sphinx. But in the last few decades, scientists pointed new machines at that ancient stone. Machines that can see through rock. And what those scans found under the Sphinx is something Egyptology still cannot fully explain. This is the story of the chambers that should not exist. The voids mapped beneath a monument that mainstream history says is solid bedrock. And the evidence that the Sphinx may be far older and far stranger than anything written in the textbooks. The Great Sphinx of Giza is one of the most studied objects on Earth. It is carved from a single mass of natural limestone, stretching roughly 240 feet long and standing about 66 feet high. The official story is simple. It was built around 2500 BCE during the reign of the pharaoh Khafre, whose pyramid sits directly behind it. The face is supposed to be his face. The monument is supposed to be solid rock with nothing hidden inside. For most of the 20th century, nobody questioned this. The Sphinx was a statue, a big one, an old one, but just a statue. Then people started looking closer, and the closer they looked, the more the official story started to crack. Here is the first thing that does not fit: the erosion. The body of the Sphinx, and especially the deep ditch carved around it, shows long vertical channels running down the stone, wavy, rounded grooves, the kind of weathering you get from heavy rainfall flowing down a surface over thousands of years. The problem is that Egypt has been a desert for a very long time. The last period when that region saw enough rain to carve stone like that ended thousands of years before Khafre was ever born. A geologist named Robert Schoch from Boston University examined the Sphinx enclosure in the early 1990s. He concluded the water erosion pattern could not have formed in a dry climate in just 4,500 years. To produce that kind of weathering, the core body of the Sphinx would have to be much older, possibly 7,000 years old, possibly more. Mainstream Egyptologists pushed back hard. They argued the erosion came from wind, or from poor quality limestone, or from chemical weathering. But the vertical channels match rainfall, not wind. Wind carves horizontal patterns. Water carves vertical ones. And that is exactly what is on the walls of the Sphinx enclosure. If you find buried history as unsettling as I do, subscribe and turn on the bell. Because we are only getting started, and what the scanning machines found below the surface is far harder to explain than the erosion above it. For decades, the argument about the Sphinx was all about the surface, the face, the weathering, the proportions. Then, technology gave researchers a way to look at what no human eye could see: underground. In 1987, a team from Waseda University in Japan, led by Sakuji Yoshimura, brought electromagnetic sounding equipment to Giza. This was non-invasive, no digging, just instruments that send signals into the ground and read what bounces back. The technique can reveal differences in density beneath solid rock. Cavities read differently than bedrock. Hollow spaces show up. The Japanese team reported anomalies. They detected what appeared to be a cavity beneath the left paw of the Sphinx, and indications of a tunnel-like feature running underneath the body, heading toward the pyramid of Khafre. They were so intrigued they wanted to continue, but the work was not allowed to advance the way they hoped. Here is where it gets strange. Around the same time, in 1991, an American geophysicist named Thomas Dobecki conducted a seismic survey at the base of the Sphinx. He was working alongside the Schoch team. Seismic surveys send sound waves into the ground and measure how they travel through different materials. Solid rock and empty space return very different readings. Dobecki's data suggested something remarkable. Beneath the front paws, just a few meters down, there appeared to be a rectangular void, a space with straight edges, roughly 9 meters by 12 meters. Straight lines do not usually occur naturally inside bedrock. Nature carves curves and cracks. Right angles suggest something made, a rectangular chamber with regular dimensions sitting under the paws of a monument that is officially supposed to be solid stone. That is not erosion. That is not a coincidence of geology. That is a room. The Egyptian authorities reportedly halted further seismic work shortly after. Permits became difficult. The deeper surveys that researchers wanted to run were not approved. The data that existed was published, debated, and then largely set aside by the mainstream as inconclusive. But the readings did not go away. The void was on the record. That is the first chamber. Now we get to the part that connects this monument to a legend that refuses to die. Long before any of these scans, there was a story, and the story described exactly what the machines later found. In the 1930s and 40s, a man named Edgar Cayce made a series of strange statements about Giza. Cayce was famous in his time for delivering readings in a trance-like state. He claimed that beneath the Sphinx lay a hidden chamber. He called it the Hall of Records. According to him, it held the written history of a lost civilization, sealed away and waiting to be found. He even predicted, roughly, when it would be discovered, placing it near the end of the 20th century. For years, that claim sat in the realm of pure mysticism, easy to dismiss, a psychic talking about a secret library under a statue. Then the surveys happened, and the instruments detected voids and a rectangular cavity in close to the exact area the old prophecy described. The location lined up. That does not prove a lost library, but it is an uncomfortable overlap, and it is one reason the Sphinx scans drew so much attention and so much suspicion. Now, decode the second clue, and this one is about the body itself. Look at the proportions of the Sphinx. The head is strikingly small compared to the massive body. For a monument carved by master sculptors, the scale feels wrong. The head looks too little for the shoulders beneath it. Some researchers have a bold explanation. The original monument was never a human-headed Sphinx at all. The body, they argue, is far older, and the original head was much larger. Possibly the head of a lion, the body of the Sphinx is unmistakably leonine, a crouching lion. A lion's body with a lion's head would have been in perfect proportion. The theory goes that thousands of years after the original carving, a later pharaoh recarved the worn, oversized head down into the smaller human face we see today, the face of a king. That would explain the mismatch. It would also explain why the head shows far less erosion than the body. The head was recut much later, from fresher stone, while the body kept the scars of a far older age. And there is an astronomical layer to this. A lion points to a specific moment in the sky. Due to the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, the constellations that rise at dawn on the spring equinox shift over thousands of years. Around 10,500 BCE, the sun rose at the equinox in the constellation of Leo, the lion. A lion-bodied monument facing due east, watching the sunrise, would have been gazing directly at its own celestial mirror in that distant age. Researchers like Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval argued that the monuments of Giza encode that exact date. They weren't guessing. They were reading the sky written into the stone. Mainstream Egyptology rejects this. The official date stays at 2500 BCE, but the erosion says older. The proportions say older, and the stars say older. 3 separate clues from 3 completely different fields, all pointing away from the textbook answer. That is the second clue. The third one is buried deeper, and it is the one that brought the heavy machines back to Giza. In the years that followed, more advanced scanning came to the plateau. Ground-penetrating radar, resistivity surveys, tools that map the subsurface in finer and finer detail. Researchers continued to report anomalies around and beneath the Sphinx, spaces, gaps, features that did not read like natural rock. Reports described possible shafts and tunnel-like passages near and under the monument, some seeming to connect toward the wider Giza complex. There is a known vertical shaft cut into the rock at the rear of the Sphinx, documented by archaeologists. There are passages that have been found and sealed. The plateau is honeycombed with cut features. So, the idea of hidden space beneath the monument is not pure fantasy. The bedrock under Giza genuinely contains cavities, cut tunnels, and chambers. The fight is about which ones are natural, which ones are ancient, and which ones the authorities have chosen not to open. And that is the pattern that keeps repeating with the Sphinx. Something gets detected, excitement builds, and then access closes. Permits stall, projects end. The full, deep excavation that would settle the question once and for all has never been allowed beneath those paws. The official explanation is preservation. The monument is fragile. Digging could damage it. That is a legitimate concern. But to the people who watched survey after survey get cut short, it has started to feel like something else. It has started to feel like a door that nobody in charge wants opened. Now, does any of this prove there is a lost library of a vanished civilization sealed under the Great Sphinx? Probably not. That is the most extreme version of the story, and it rests on a psychic's vision and a handful of contested readings. We should be honest about that. But that does not make the discovery ordinary. Strip away the wildest claims, and you are still left with something that genuinely unsettles the timeline. Here is the grounded version, and it is fascinating on its own. The seismic and electromagnetic surveys are real. They were done by credentialed scientists. They detected genuine subsurface anomalies, including features with surprisingly regular shapes. The water erosion on the Sphinx enclosure is real, and the geological argument that it points to a wetter, earlier climate has never been fully answered. The proportional mismatch between head and body is real and visible to anyone. None of this requires aliens or magic. It requires only one thing: that the Great Sphinx, or at least its core body, might be much older than 2500 BCE. That it might have been carved by a culture we have not properly identified, in a time when the Sahara was green, and rain still fell on Giza. That alone would rewrite the story of civilization. Because the textbook says complex monument building began with the early dynasties of Egypt. If the Sphinx predates them by thousands of years, then someone capable of carving a 240-foot monument out of bedrock existed before the civilization that supposedly invented it. And if that's true, it means our history is missing a chapter, a lost period of skill and ambition that we have no name for. And the voids underneath only deepen the mystery, whether they hold records or tombs or simple storage chambers or nothing but empty rooms cut for reasons we cannot guess. They are spaces that were made, right angles in solid bedrock. Rooms beneath the paws of the world's most famous statue. Spaces that have been detected by machines, debated by experts, and then left sealed. Think about what that means. We have the technology to map them. We have known they are there for over 30 years. The Sphinx is the most visited ancient monument on the planet, studied by more researchers than almost any object in human history. And there is still, right now, an unopened space beneath it that no one has been permitted to enter. The most examined statue on Earth is still keeping a secret in the dark beneath its feet. So the question is not really whether something is down there. The surveys already answered that. Something is. The question is why, after all this time, we still have not been allowed to look. What is the harm in opening an empty room? And if it is empty, why has every effort to reach it quietly run out of permits and faded into silence? The Great Sphinx still sits on the edge of the Giza Plateau, facing the rising sun exactly as it has for thousands of years, however many thousands that truly is. The tourists still come, the cameras still flash, and beneath the paws, a few meters down, the rectangular void is still there, still mapped, still sealed, still waiting in the dark for someone with the courage, or the permission, to finally break through. The scans gave us the outline of a door. Egyptology has spent decades insisting there is nothing behind it, but the machines disagree. and the stone remembers a world far older than the one we were taught. If forgotten history like this keeps you up at night, the next investigation goes even deeper into what the Giza Plateau is still hiding. Watch it on screen now.